The morning fog clings to Guadalcanal, a damp shroud over the jungle. It's August 7th, 1942. Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki brings his binoculars to his eyes, his hands steady, disciplined. These are the same hands that applauded the news of Pearl Harbor in a Tokyo briefing room just months ago. From his hidden post, he scans the Pacific horizon, his mind filled with the certainty of doctrine. The Americans, he believes, are disorganized. They have factories, yes, but their spirit is clumsy. Their navy is large, but its coordination is weak. Amphibious warfare belongs to Japan. Then the silence shatters. A lookout's shout cracks through the humid air. Ships, enemy ships. Ichiki raises his binoculars again, expecting a small, probing force, maybe a few transports. But what he sees isn't a handful of ships. The horizon is full, not dozens, hundreds. The sea itself seems to heave under the weight of steel. Transports, cruisers, destroyers, battleships. They stretch so far that the curve of the earth seems to swallow them. Later, Ichiki would write that the fleet extended beyond the limits of sight. They move with an unnatural precision, each vessel holding its position as if locked to an invisible grid. The spacing is exact, the timing flawless. Impossible, he murmurs. The radio explodes with frantic reports from posts across the island, voices colliding, numbers climbing. Enemy force exceeds all estimates. Then, a clear transmission cuts through the static. Over 800 ships. Repeat, over 800 ships approaching Guadalcanal. Ichiki slowly lowers his binoculars. As a graduate of the Imperial Military Academies, he has studied every one of Japan's 29 successful amphibious landings, from China to the Philippines. He knows what they look like: confusion, delays, exposed transports. But this defies every model of warfare he understands. The American fleet isn't a clumsy mob. It advances in layered waves, each phase timed with surgical accuracy. Naval guns rotate toward the shore in synchronized arcs. Aircraft appear overhead in precise formations, not scattered patrols, but structured combat elements, moving with radio-guided discipline. Destroyer screens slide into position without a moment's hesitation. Landing craft are lowered from transports at exact intervals, each movement triggering the next like gears in a massive, terrifying machine. Nearly 1,000 ships are operating as one. His aide approaches, notebook in hand. "Sir, your orders." Ichiki doesn't answer right away. He just stares at the approaching armada, his entire worldview beginning to fracture. The Americans, the same ones dismissed as inefficient and doctrinally inferior, displaying a level of coordination that rivals and perhaps even exceeds Japan's own. How, he asks aloud, not expecting an answer, does a force coordinate something like this? The question hangs in the air as the first American shells begin their calculated journey toward Japanese positions. 6 months earlier, in the polished conference rooms of Imperial Naval Headquarters, confidence was absolute. Maps glowed with victories marked in red. "We are the masters of seaborne assault," Admiral Yamamoto had declared. "The Americans have factories, but not the spirit required for complex operations." Intelligence reports all agreed. Now, watching the armada approach Guadalcanal, Ichiki feels that confidence dissolve like the morning mist. The first doubts had surfaced after Tarawa, with survivor reports of tracked landing vehicles that crossed coral reefs as if they weren't there. The stories were dismissed as exaggeration, but the pattern continued. Every American landing showed impossible coordination. Naval gunfire lifting at the precise moment. Airstrikes synchronized to the minute. Navy, Marine, and Army units functioning as a single integrated system. For Colonel Ichiki, the realization is deeply personal. His family line traces back to samurai. His father died serving the emperor. Tells him that belief is wrong. June 15th, 1944, Saipan. Vice Admiral Kiyonao Nagumo stands in his command bunker, binoculars raised to his eyes. These are the same eyes that watched smoke pour from the battleships at Pearl Harbor just 3 years earlier. Now, through those same lenses, he sees American battleships advancing once more. Among them are familiar silhouettes, scarred but not broken. The USS Maryland, Tennessee, and Pennsylvania ships left crippled in the shallow waters of Ford Island, now restored, modernized, and returned for vengeance. They are part of the largest fleet ever assembled in the Pacific, a ghost from the past leading an unstoppable future. Nagumo murmurs, how ironic. He, the architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, had coordinated 6 aircraft carriers in perfect secrecy, a feat of planning and discipline that shocked the world. But what he witnesses now dwarfs his greatest achievement. 800 ships of the American Fifth Fleet move in a formation so vast and precise it defies belief. It's not just a fleet, it's a floating city of steel, organized with a logic that seems almost alien. This is not the same enemy, he says quietly to his staff. The enemy from Pearl Harbor was complacent. This one is something else entirely. At exactly 5:45, as if controlled by a single switch, the American naval guns open fire. Not approximately, exactly. Across a 15-mile battle line, hundreds of guns engage within seconds of one another. The very air seems to rip apart. This isn't just firepower. It's a symphony of destruction, conducted with a timing that speaks of flawless communication systems operating under the immense pressure of combat. On the same day, another Japanese officer, Colonel Ichiki Kiyonao, watches from his own position. As the early morning fog burns away, the scale of the American operation becomes crushingly clear. American aircraft filled the sky, not in chaotic swarms, but in measured, disciplined formations. Fighter escorts maintain exact spacing, weaving a protective net around the bombers. Dive bombers arrive in timed, predictable waves, one after another, striking with terrifying accuracy. Radio intercepts paint an even grimmer picture. Japanese planners had always believed that the kind of dynamic, real-time coordination the Americans were demonstrating was simply unattainable. Yet, here it was. Pilots were receiving updated targeting instructions mid-flight based on battlefield data that was only moments old. Naval gunfire was being adjusted by observers already ashore. Airstrikes were being redirected based on the slightest movement of Japanese troops. For a Japanese commander, an operation of this complexity would require weeks, even months, of painstaking rehearsal. The Americans appeared to be doing it dynamically, improvising under fire, their entire force acting as a single, thinking organism. As the landing craft churned toward the shore, their timing is flawless. Ichiki sees that each wave is a carefully balanced mix of infantry, armor, artillery, and logistics. It's a combined arms force in miniature, replicated hundreds of times over. Offshore, specialized communications ships act as the fleet's central nervous system, managing the entire ballet of war with disciplined radio control. This isn't simply a victory of superior numbers. It is a revolution in military organization. Ichiki clutches a letter from his wife in his pocket. She wrote of their young son, who was eager to serve the emperor. The boy believed, as Ichiki himself once did, that the pure, unconquerable Japanese spirit, the Yamato Damasha, could overcome any material disadvantage. Watching the perfectly timed waves of American steel approach the beach, Ichiki understands a terrible truth. He is witnessing the death of that idea. The question is no longer whether the Americans will land. It is whether Japanese military doctrine itself can survive the discovery that its core assumptions were catastrophically wrong. Back in his bunker, Nagumo receives the reports. The landing waves arrive in a relentless sequence. First, the assault troops to establish a beachhead. Then, Sherman tanks roll ashore, maneuvering with a combined arms discipline that Japanese intelligence had dismissed as impossible for the Americans. Then comes the artillery, followed by command units, positioning themselves for battles that hadn't even been fought yet, but were already anticipated. Intercepted American transmissions are blunt, almost casual. Casualties light, advancing toward airstrip, light resistance. All of Nagumo's carefully prepared defenses, the pillboxes, the machine gun nests, the hidden artillery, all of it is being reduced to a footnote in the story of the American advance. When his troops attempt to counterattack, they face something they have never encountered before. It isn't just firepower, it's anticipation. The moment a Japanese unit moves, it is seen. Naval guns shift their aim instantly. Air support arrives on call. Tanks, infantry, artillery, and aircraft operate not as separate branches, but as one integrated weapon. It's like fighting an enemy who can read your mind. The night brings no relief. Japanese doctrine had always relied on night infiltration tactics to level the playing field, but this enemy has stolen the darkness. Illumination rounds turn the battlefield into an eerie daylight. Radar-assisted naval guns fire with pinpoint accuracy at targets they cannot see. American reserves, already prepositioned, are waiting to obliterate any force that tries to advance. These once feared infiltration tactics become a slaughter. An officer suggests a withdrawal to a secondary defensive line. Nagumo's reply is bleak. There are no secondary positions, none that can survive this. He watches the American logistical machine function with the same cold precision as their attacks. Ammunition, fuel, blood, plasma, and reinforcements arrive exactly where they are needed, exactly when they are needed. At Pearl Harbor, Nagumo had achieved victory through meticulous planning and surprise. Here, the Americans are achieving dominance through organization and coordination at a scale he can barely comprehend. They have surpassed us, he finally admits. The Americans hadn't just matched Japan's military prowess. They had completely reinvented the rules of warfare. By evening, the American forces are consolidating their gains with the same brutal efficiency they displayed in their attack. Their casualties are far below what anyone, including themselves, had projected. Nagumo understands the final, undeniable truth. The Japanese way of war, a tradition of samurai, valor, and spiritual strength, has become an artifact of an earlier age. It is a relic, beautiful in its own way, but utterly powerless against the modern, industrial, networked system of war that has just landed on Saipan. 3 weeks later, with the battle lost and his command destroyed, Vice Admiral Nagumo takes his own life. But the realization he had on that day did not die with him. It spread like a shockwave through the highest levels of the Japanese military. At Iwo Jima, General Kuribayashi, having studied the lessons of Saipan, completely redesigned his defenses. He abandoned the traditional beach defense, knowing it was futile. Instead, he built a complex network of tunnels and underground bunkers, preparing for a brutal war of attrition, one designed to bleed the unstoppable American machine. In Tokyo, the emperor privately acknowledged to his advisors that a military victory might now be impossible. The cabinet of Prime Minister Tojo, the man who had led Japan into the war, collapsed. The national strategy shifted from glorious expansion to desperate survival. Historians would later identify the source of this new American power. It wasn't just one thing. It was standardized doctrine across all branches of the military. It was a joint command structure that forced the Army, Navy, and Air Force to work together. It was integrated communications systems that linked every unit, from the battleship commander to the infantry private. And it was America's immense industrial capacity, applied not just to building more weapons, but to building a more organized system. From the brutal learning grounds of Guadalcanal and Tarawa to the devastating efficiency of Saipan, each battle was a lesson. Each landing refined the process for the next. By the time of the battle for Okinawa, American amphibious coordination had become so advanced that it rendered traditional defense completely obsolete. Modern warfare, the kind we know today, was born in those perfectly timed waves. The lesson of that day on Saipan echoes through history. It's a lesson that wars are no longer won by courage or spirit alone. They are won by a system. They are won by the ability to see the entire battlefield, to communicate across it instantly, and to act as one unified, intelligent whole. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of history interesting, be sure to subscribe for more.